Order!
Drin Winzi Shakut in Kat, no Hola Kat, Drin no Henjit Gesti Jagenjit Jat Ishi. Before we start, I'd welcome everyone, and that I'll be doing the prayer. I'll be doing the Lord's Prayer, Shikinjikyu, in my language, and you can follow. Nohiti Jejit Napoljik, Nuri Sri Juju, Nohik Agwadat Najujit, Nienji Jejik, Wikidnankaka Kutabonji. G Drinjit, Nohenanchit, Drindolta, but the Naja Noashi, Noat Bandu, Noat Uan Kuchili, Nitsoina Bandu, Noat and Gideon Goods at Uan Kuchili, Gok Undai Goods at Nohatuno, Ashro, Hot Bandu Goods at Nohenanji, Gorad units and Lili Gok Agwadat, I Aqua wanted Chicago Shikenjit. Amen. Hi.
I'd like to thank Karen Mitchell for the opening blessing. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to rise on a point of personal explanation under sections 1.8 brackets 1 of our rules. It says a member may rise a point of personal explanation in the Assembly at the earliest opportunity. This is my first opportunity. The headline in the front page of today's Northern News Service's The Yellowknifer reads as follows: YK Centre MLA wants Finance Minister ousted. The headline is misleading with their word choice of ousted. It leads the reader with the confusing impression that I want the minister removed from cabinet. I know this because a few people had inquired regarding the confusion it has caused. To be clear, no one has been angry, but certainly confused with the impression that I wanted her removed from cabinet, and they wanted to understand why. The article within the newspaper, without forensic review, appears on surface to be correct, but you have to decide to read it after the headline. For the record, I am only suggesting that it may be time to consider having a shuffle in cabinet based on my concerns raised, of which won't be revisited today. Might I end on this point, Mr. Speaker? It is true that sensationalized headlines can be an opportunity to pump up and draw interest to an issue. But left to stand alone, it can cause confusion and unintended results, which it appears to have had. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Assembly for hearing this clarification. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife Centre. Minister statements. Minister for Housing, N.W.T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about an issue that is important to the maintenance of the public housing stock. I am speaking about damage to public housing units and the cost to the local housing organizations and housing N.W.T. I want to highlight how this damage impacts the work plan of the local housing organizations and housing N.W.T. Housing N.W.T. and local housing organizations strive to support tenants to be successful. Part of that success relies on the tenant keeping up with their responsibilities. This includes taking care of their unit, keeping it clean, and preventing damage. If a tenant or their guest causes damage, the tenant is responsible for the repairs. Let me be clear, this does not apply to normal wear and tear. We are talking about major damage, like broken windows in a public housing unit. Local housing organizations do their best to provide services as quickly as possible if a unit is compromised due to damage. However, avoidable damage that requires a contractor can be costly and take time to repair. And if this damage occurs during the winter season, both the tenant and the housing organization are under pressure to find appropriate accommodation and speedy repair. This also takes funding away from other repairs that are needed in public housing units. Under the Residential Tenancies Act, Housing N.W.T is responsible for maintenance and repairs on its buildings, while tenants are responsible for covering the cost of damages caused by themselves, their pets, or visitors. Tenants are also required to notify a landlord if there's any problems with the property. For example, if somebody or something breaks or if there's a health or safety problem, tenants must let the local housing organization know as soon as possible. Tenants must take this responsibility seriously. We can all agree that maintaining good quality housing stock is extremely important, especially with the housing situation across the territory. The more damage caused, the longer the wait times to repair the unit, as well as the higher cleaning and repair cost. Housing N.W.T aims to preserve the quality and longevity of our units, ensuring that they remain safe, comfortable, and are in good condition for all tenants for years to come. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about the damage that other people are causing to public housing units. We are seeing damage like broken windows and graffiti that is not being caused by the public housing tenants or their guests. When windows are broken or units are damaged, it takes time and money to fix. Time and money that could be going towards completing our other essential repairs inside of these homes. It also makes our communities look run down when we have boarded up windows and homes in disrepair. This both saddens and frustrates me, Mr. Speaker. We need to take pride in our communities and not cause unnecessary damage. We need to take personal responsibility for the state of our communities and recognize how important these homes are to our families, friends, and neighbours. This unnecessary damage directly impacts people's lives. Let us work together to keep our houses in good repair and condition and keep our communities beautiful. In the Northwest Territories, there's always a call for more affordable housing. We have to remember that damages to units will take funds that have been allocated for other projects, such as building more affordable housing. Damage can also result in people losing their homes. Continued unnecessary damage to units can make it impossible for Housing N.W.T and local housing organizations to keep up with repairs. This means that eventually homes become uninhabitable and people cannot live in them. Mr. Speaker, if tenants are causing continual damage, it can also result in evictions. Housing N.W.T and the local housing organizations do not take evictions lightly. Evictions are a last action in a long-tracked process seeking to address non-compliance with a tenancy agreement, including damage to a unit. This is an issue that concerns us all. No one wants to see people homeless or families compromised. We are investing in seeing all residents with a roof over the head and safety for their families. As part of our commitment to ensuring a healthier living environment, Housing N.W.T is committed to providing safe and healthy public housing units that are positively affecting tenants' well-being and provide a home for their family members. Together, we can create thriving communities and comfortable homes for everyone. Koe naini, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister for Housing N.W.T. Before we move on to other minister statements, I'd like to recognize our former Premier, Stephen Cathway. He was elected in 1987 and finished his job in 2003, but he's still a strong advocate for the residents of the Northwest Territories. Welcome to the House, Premier. Minister statements. Minister, Municipal and Community Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, the Government of Northwest Territories has committed to making programs and services more accessible to the residents and do better to streamline administrative processes. Today, I am pleased to announce a new initiative that will change the way businesses in the Territory obtain their business licenses. The launch of our new e-service program for business licenses is a major step in promoting a business-friendly environment to demonstrate our commitment to supporting the economic growth across the territory. This new e-service program is designed to streamline the licensing process, making it more efficient, accessible, and user-friendly for business owners. By leveraging modern technology, we are reducing the administrative burden on businesses, which will allow them to focus more on their operations and less on paperwork. Mr. Speaker, this new service is specifically tailored for businesses in remote areas and small communities not governed by local business licensing bylaws. This focus ensures that even more isolated entrepreneurs have the tools they need to succeed. The e-service program offers several key features that will benefit business owners, including the fact that it can be accessed 24/7, so that business owners can apply and renew their business licenses anytime, anywhere, using the computer or mobile device. At the same time, the application process was simplified with clear instructions and fewer steps so that the residents can attain their business license faster. Applicants will also receive real-time updates on their application status in an effort to promote transparency and reduce uncertainty. Finally, the system boasts strong security measures to protect sensitive information and to ensure the integrity of the licensing process. Mr. Speaker, this e-service program is a testament to our government's commitment to innovation and efficiency. By embracing digital solutions, we are not only improving the experience for business owners, but enhancing the effectiveness of our regulatory process. I want to thank everyone who helped bring this project to life, including program staff, IT specialists, and the business owners who provided the valuable feedback. As we celebrate the launch of this e-service program, I encourage all applicable business owners in the Northwest Territories to take advantage of this new tool. Whether you are starting a new venture or renewing an existing license, this program is designed to make the process smooth and more efficient. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to reiterate our government's commitment to supporting the business community and driving economic growth in the Northwest Territories. The launch of this e-service program is one of many steps we are taking to achieve this goal. We will continue to seek an innovative solution and work collaboratively with stakeholders to ensure the success and prosperity of all businesses in the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Minister statements. Minister for Education, Culture and Employment.
Mr. Speaker, skilled tradespeople are needed everywhere, now more than ever. Apprentices and journey persons are a vital part of our economy. They literally keep the wheels turning, buildings standing, water flowing, and the lights on. These careers offer good pay, advancement opportunities, mobility, and lifelong learning. Becoming a tradesperson means taking charge of your future and aligning your interests and skills with a rewarding career. Getting there requires certification, and the Government of the Northwest Territories is here to provide comprehensive support. We offer career planning, help with applications, help with preparing for trade entrance exams, financial support during technical training, and educational support at every stage of an apprenticeship. In high school, students can jump into their future through the Schools North Apprenticeship Program, or SNAP. Through this program, students explore a trade, gain work experience, get paid, and earn high school credits, all while completing their high school education. It's a chance to see if a trade is the right fit and to start building a solid foundation for their future career. This program could not be successful without the engagement of Northern employers who take on SNAP students and apprentices, and we're always looking for more. Career development officers are also there to support with study skills, access to educational materials, and help with the paperwork for technical training financial assistance. They offer personalized support to anyone interested in pursuing a trades career. They connect residents with resources for educational assessments, help with apprenticeship and technical training applications, and help understand the path to graduation. Mr. Speaker, we've recently announced a 2-year extension to the Apprenticeship Trades and Occupational Certification Strategy. This extension builds on our success in 4 important areas: helping people receive training, supporting them in finding work, growing the workforce through partnerships, and making informed decisions with the right information about the job market. Mr. Speaker, National Skilled Trade and Technology Week is held in early November each year. It is a time to raise awareness of the career opportunities in the trades and celebrate N.W.T apprentices and journey persons who have successfully completed their training. Every year, awards are presented for outstanding achievements highlighting N.W.T's exceptional talent. This year, we're celebrating 33 new journey persons and 20 top mark apprentices. Thank you, colleagues. These individuals come from every region of the Northwest Territories and represent 15 different trades and occupations. These apprentices and their journey persons will have a real impact on their communities. Their skills guarantee that the lights go on, roofs go over our heads, plumbing works, heating systems operate, and yes, that roads are built. Mr. Speaker, I invite all members of this Legislative Assembly to join me in celebrating the employers dedicated to strengthening our workforce, the apprentices working towards certification, and the journey persons across our territory who have successfully completed their training. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister statements. Minister statements. Member statements. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the statement made by the. Do I need to worry about the clock here?
Just go.
Just go. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the statement made by the Minister on trade skill development. It jives well with the statement I was going to make today on workforce development. Mr. Speaker, there are a number of projects in the budget which claim to support workforce development simply by being implemented. It will require people to build and operate. Therefore, we are building our workforce. But is this really part of a strategically thought-out plan? One of the key problems I see in our economy is that we aren't achieving education outcomes and sending students to post-secondary in sufficient numbers to produce a local workforce, so many of the jobs we create go to southern contractors and employees because we can't staff them. Look at the employment numbers for the Giant Mine Remediation Project, for example. They're sitting at 36% northern employment. From 1996 to 2019, around 40% of employment at the diamond mines was northern. Meanwhile, our employment rate hovers around 65 to 70% overall and 50% for Indigenous persons. So there is a lot of room for northern employment growth. A fundamental question raised by comparative analysis is what role should the government be playing in the economy? Is it our role to be industry or to create an attractive investment environment and educate, house, and support a workforce who can take advantage of available jobs? I recognize that answer isn't black and white. Of course, government contracts play a significant role in the economy here. But when we're facing tough questions about where to put our money, I think we need to be carefully considering not just the benefits one type of investment might produce, but the opportunity costs of that investment compared to others, and what outcomes government is best positioned to meaningfully change. This kind of analysis is contained in the Greenland Economic Report I tabled last sitting, and again, I strongly encourage us to be applying this kind of analysis to our business planning. If northern employment is an outcome we're trying to achieve, let's analyze how best to achieve it and use that information to shift resources accordingly. We can't afford to be doing a little bit of everything and just hoping that it will all somehow come together in the end. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Frame Lake. Member statements. Member from Nuvik-Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Standing Committee on Accountability and Oversight, later today I will read a report in the House that shares our observations and serious concerns regarding the crisis conditions that have developed in the delivery of healthcare and social services and the lack of affordability and availability of housing stocks across the territory. In response, we are calling for an immediate course correction and meaningful intervention by the government to address these unsustainable issues. Mr. Speaker, committee acknowledges the capital budget is before us, but we cannot approve it without seeing real commitments for change and a shift in government resources that better reflects the concerns of the N.W.T residents and the priorities of this Assembly. Mr. Speaker, we are fully committed to collaborating with our partners in the Executive Council to solve these problems. Consensus government requires us all to work together and be accountable to our constituents and to the Assembly's shared priorities. Mr. Speaker, by focusing on these priorities, we believe we can create a more prosperous and resilient future for everyone. We look forward to continuing this important conversation and hope to see the necessary shifts during this sitting. Mr. Speaker, it is not lost on committee the gravity of the position that we have taken, and we would reiterate that we are urgently seeking a course correction from government with appropriate resourcing behind it. Committee is deeply concerned about the fragility of our healthcare system and the apparent inability to put appropriate resources into housing. Mr. Speaker, we will speak further to this matter later today. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Nunavut Lake. Member statements. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Yellowknifers are passionate about their beloved multi-use green space park, Tin Can Hill. It is a favoured destination for fat bikes, dog walks, sled rides, and local photo shoots, just to name a few activities throughout all the seasons. As Tin Can Hill is in my riding, one of the first conversations I had after Cabinet was selected was with the Minister of ECE. I asked the Minister about plans for the site by the Aurora College Transformation Project to seek clarity on what the situation was, what was coming, as it was not clear to me or the public at that time. Mr. Speaker, it's still not clear to me or the public now, nearly a full year later. Part of that conversation was about how ECE had set out on a path to undertake an environmental site assessment. I was given assurances that I would hear more about the ESA in March. Seeing as how it's nearly November, you can understand my frustration and the frustration of residents. Another part of that conversation with the Minister was my highlighting the GNWT's woeful lack of consultation before entering an MOU with the City of Yellowknife for the parcel of land we know as Tin Can Hill. Yesterday, I tabled a journal article by Sherry Arnstein titled "A Ladder of Citizen Participation." Since 1969, it has been referenced by policy analysts and advocates to show how far governments take steps up the ladder of citizen participation, and ultimately, how much influence they have over government decisions. I'd argue that the GNWT often only reach as far as informing our citizens, which you'll note that the article considers a form of tokenism. In my experience, most people would like to feel heard on issues like this one that matter very much for their quality of life. The GNWT's own public engagement employee guide advises of the GNWT's obligation to engage as being politically advisable, in brackets optional, which leads me to wonder why it was considered optional for talking about the development on Tin Can Hill. Mr. Speaker, it feels as though because the GNWT knew what kind of feedback it was going to get, it did not seek that feedback at all on Tin Can Hill. This means we haven't even stepped the foot on the ladder of citizen participation. We should take the concerns of our residents seriously. Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to conclude my statement.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Member from Great Slave has asked unanimous consent to conclude her statement. Seeing no nays, you may conclude your statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, colleagues. We should take the concerns of our residents seriously, seeking feedback on new initiatives and adequately incorporating feedback where appropriate, or explaining why we can't. It's clear we haven't done a good job for this for the residents who care about Tin Can Hill, and I want to be crystal clear. I don't blame GNWT communications staff at all. I'm frustrated with GNWT decision makers. I will have questions for the Minister of ECE at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Great Slave. Member statements. Member from Mophie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to talk about getting community projects started in the Cleacher region, especially now that we're focusing on capital infrastructure that's before us. So, Mr. Speaker, there is currently no swimming pool in the Cleacher region. In the past, Betcherco and Edzo both had a seasonal swimming pool, which was open during summer months. This created summer employment and training opportunities for our young people. Betcherco pool was dismantled due to asbestos. The pool in Edzo burned down in 2014 and was never replaced. Mr. Speaker, We know these facilities improve our communities and create healthy ways for youth to spend their time. This is true when we look at other jurisdictions. The new pool in Yellowknife is nearly completed. The City of Iqaluit Aquatic Center, which was finished in 2016, has raised a recreation fund of more than $1 million to help low-income families access the pool there. Yesterday, the government of Alberta pledged to spend $60 million on its municipalities over the next 3 years. The Klitschko region has a sportsplex, but not all youth and families use the facility. I can tell you that families will use a swimming pool to spend quality time with their children. A year-round swimming pool in N.W.T and Betcheko would create meaningful employment, new training, and career opportunities. Mr. Speaker, I want to know what help we can provide our communities to get projects like these underway. Klitschko citizens will visit the Ruth Ench Memorial Pool in Yellowknife for Klitschko family swimming on Saturday, November 2nd. Mr. Speaker, my constituents tell me not everyone can drive to Yellowknife to use the pool at the scheduled times, especially residents from N.W.T, and I am worried about the road conditions during the upcoming winter month. Mr. Speaker, I will have questions for the Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Member from Wolfley. Member statements. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Project planning for the upcoming winter road season. Mr. Speaker, winter is upon us, and the winter roads construction and maintenance will be starting soon. Mr. Speaker, preparations are needed for the high volume of expected traffic. Mr. Speaker, the Sawtooth resupply grocers projects, the LTL truckloads will be into the hundreds. We have our window. It is short and one only. Mr. Speaker, the community of Fort Good Hope has secured financing and land for their home manufacturing construction center. The inland communities of Delaney and Cove Lake, the annual fuel resupply is well over beyond 100 truckloads. The N.W.T fuel supplies are in 4 of 5 communities. Mr. Speaker, in addition, the commercial industrial community of Norman Wells will include truckloads well into the hundreds. More importantly, we cannot overlook and undermine our public safety obligations. Mr. Speaker, project logistics and planning are essential to assuring maintaining schedules, budgets, and safety. It is critical for project assurances. Our next scheduled house sitting is February 5, 2025. We cannot wait. Winter road construction on average starts the later part of November. In closing, Mr. Speaker, the last winter road season, the Minister of Infrastructure supported a similar engagement to expedite consultation with the stakeholders. I will have questions to the appropriate minister later. Thank you. Must hear here.
Thank you, Member from the Sawtooth. Member statements. Member from Yellowknife North.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oh, my computer is... Mr. Speaker, today I will continue talking about our staffing crisis in the healthcare system, and specifically address a source of long-standing frustration amongst shift workers, the fact that many are being denied the full amount of leave that they're entitled to. Physicians, nurses, and other practitioners are given a certain amount of leave under their collective agreements, except that the health authority retains the ability to deny anyone's leave application due to operational requirements or regional procedure. Our health system does require a certain number of people on shift 24/7. But we are not unique in this. Surely other health systems have come up with formulas to ensure frontline staff can take leave. Currently, a combination of chronic understaffing and also our policies and how they're applied make it virtually mathematically impossible for all of our shift workers to take all their leave. In some cases, someone's application for leave sits undecided with approval pending for so long that even if it does get approved at the last minute, it's impossible for someone to plan a vacation anyways. Our veteran nurses are being pressured to forego their vacation so that younger nurses can take their days off so they don't mutiny. Many are expected to be available on their days off, even if they're not being paid to be officially on call. At our territorial hospital emergency room, practitioners are even being denied sick leave when they're legitimately sick because there's no one to cover. We need to retain our employees and not rely primarily on locums and agency nurses. We know that it's more cost-efficient, provides higher quality health care with more cultural safety. But why would a nurse or doctor choose to work as a contracted employee for the health authority when they could have more freedom as a locum or an agency nurse? A major reason is the employee benefits, including leave. But if we don't allow them to take that leave, then what's the point? It is one reason we're seeing more and more healthcare practitioners quit their jobs and either leave the territory or choose to work as locums. Our embattled healthcare shift workers need the minister and the health authority to first acknowledge the problem and communicate a clear plan to solve it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Member statements. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Later today, my honourable friend from Yellowknife Centre will be tabling a survey authored collaboratively between us about healthcare experience in the Northwest Territories. This work expands on the joint town hall that we undertook in the summer, attended by over 100 people. I invite the House and the public to read the survey and note that while 59% of respondents rated their quality of care as excellent, only 25% were satisfied with their overall healthcare experience. Here's what some of them had to say. Quote, stop saying it's a staffing issue for all healthcare and properly staffed. You have managers who have no idea how to manage. They never listen to the staff who do the work. Quote, the whole healthcare system is falling apart. There are no appointments available, and when you have one, you feel that it's a rushed appointment and you're not listened to. The doctors are burnt out. How are we spending money on all these locums and not on our employees? Quote, the individual healthcare workers are great, but for people with complex health concerns, there seems to be no connective tissue with the overall system, holding the overall system together and providing healthcare in an informed and coordinated way. Mr. Speaker, if it wasn't clear, our healthcare system is on life support. The constant churn of locums and temporary staff have completely evaporated continuity of care in the Northwest Territories. The government has structured the healthcare system in such a way that it competes with itself for staff. Workers are leaving permanent positions to become locums to do less work for the same pay. And who could blame them? Look at the perks. Free housing, free rental cars, no paperwork to complete, live anywhere in the country, and there's more. Fly for free and get enough Aeroplan points to get as many as 10 free flights a year. Mr. Speaker, the N.W.T for some reason has optimized the healthcare system to be utterly dependent on a fly-in culture that is making healthcare outcomes worse and staff retention next to impossible. Where there were once 6-month contracts, now they are measured in weeks or days. To quote one healthcare worker, it's a free-for-all. Mr. Speaker, you cannot have a thriving healthcare system in a community if your nurses and doctors don't live in the community. What is happening in the N.W.T is not what's happening elsewhere in Canada, despite what the minister and government may say. No one will help us but ourselves to solve this problem, and if the minister cannot get the job done, then it's time for her to step aside for someone who will. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Member statements. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague, Mr. Testart, had said today, we're talking about healthcare and the survey we had discussed, as well as the actions and desperate needs our citizens are suffering from. As noted by MLA Testart, we held a joint town hall, a conversation with the community, Mr. Speaker, around healthcare. It was desperately needed. The Minister of Health was invited but declined and suggested a different date, almost 3 months hence from the inquiry of when could you be available. Unreasonable scheduling, I I considered, but it is what it is. My good colleague in conversation said, hey, let's offer more flexibility. We waited a week for a further response. And Mr. Speaker, lest we forget, a non-response to come to a meeting is still a response. But peculiar as that may be, Mr. Speaker, and it is in its own way, almost 2 weeks after our healthcare town hall discussion, she attended another Yellowknife MLA's meeting. I'm not suggesting anything bad, I'm just saying coincidence. I think not. Now, if she had attended our town hall meeting, the minister would have seen firsthand, Mr. Speaker. The Baker Centre was filled to the brim. There was not a seat available. As a matter of fact, Mr. Speaker, I'd hate to call out the centre, but they were almost at fire capacity with enthusiasm, great people, respectful people, wanting to share their stories. They wanted to be heard. They had passion. They had problems, but they wanted to be part of the solution. There were stories to tell, I tell you, Mr. Speaker, deeply personal journeys that described the trial by ordeals as they struggled to get help from anyone. Mr. Speaker, the minister would not have heard our professionals are terrible. No, she would not have heard that. But rather, she would have heard great adjectives about these great teams. The only colorful adjectives used, Mr. Speaker, were fantastic, wonderful, kind, and caring. All perfect elements of our healthcare systems and the professionals that serve us so well. It was a tough crowd, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because we had seniors who demand answers, and certainly they do, Mr. Speaker. It was a passionate crowd. Mr. Speaker, some of their stresses were about availability of seeing a doctor, the referrals that never seem to get referred, the referrals that get referred, the questions and treatment by locums who get referred to another locum and then get followed up on a locum. You know, the passion of getting to know your doctor is impossible. Later this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, I'll table a summary of our findings and we'll have a further discussion as the week goes on, including today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife Centre. Member statements. Colleagues, James Bill Nahani and his brother George were born to George and Dora Nahani on December 3rd, 1945. As some folks said, they were an early Christmas present for their parents and siblings, Francis and Mabel. During his celebration of life, a couple of stories had us laughing, like the time he would meet with a friend and his favorite saying was, 1 for the money, 2 to get ready, and 3 to go, go, go. Where was his wallet? And he would reach to his back pocket and say, it's here, nice and safe. James loved to drum dance. He was always the first up and ready to dance. The chief spoke about his passion to dance, and every time he would see him, he would ask when the next dance was going to be held. I can tell you that James was a vibrant, hardworking, and humorous person. People loved to chat with him about everything, but mostly about the old days. What was it like? How were things different? And speaking with his children, John, James, and Genevieve, they told me the one thing that everybody told them about their dad was how he loved his community. And over the course of the last week of his life, they witnessed a lot of visitors coming to visit him, including drummers on Wednesday evening. They talked about how he wanted to get up and dance, but realized he couldn't. He sat up and listened to the live drum music in his home. That night, he went to sleep with a big smile on his face, and the next morning, he talked about the honor of the drummers being in his home. Colleagues, it's very difficult to do justice to him, but I think his daughter, Genevieve, did an amazing job during his eulogy. I've attached it in my statement and would like it deemed read and printed in Hansard's. Unfortunately, James passed away on August 25th, 2024. On Wednesday, August 28th, he was laid to rest, and later the community had a supper and one last drum dance for him. I believe he was looking down on us with a big smile as the family started the dance. Family would like to thank the community for all their support during this difficult time. The outpour of support relieved so much stress. They were so grateful and appreciative for the kindness, thoughts, prayers, words, and deeds. James will be sadly missed. God bless you, James. Member statements. Member statements. Returns to oral questions. Member or Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a return to oral question asked by the member for Yellowknife North on June 13, 2024, regarding wellness and addiction recommendation. the Ministers' Forum on Addictions and Community Wellness, Healing Voices, which took place on April 30th, 2013. Specifically, the member asked if the department had addressed the recommendations made in the Healing Voices report. The Ministers' Forum consisted of 12 members who traveled to 21 communities to listen to Northerners about what they felt were the best way to stop destructive impacts of alcohol, drug, and other addictions on N.W.T. communities. The Healing Voices report included valuable feedback from community members that was then organized into recommendations. Of the 67 recommendations made, the government of the Northwest Territories accepted 59. As requested by the member, I have also provided a copy of a list which provides an update on recommendations 7, 11, 29, and 54, for which the Department of Health and Social Services has responsibility. Later today, I will also table a copy of this update on recommendations 7, 11, 29, and 54. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Return to oral questions. Return to oral questions. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today I would like to recognize Vicki Johnson. She is a constituent of mine. She is doing good work with the Tin Can Hill Conservation Committee, and she is here today to see the exchange with the Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Member from Hay River North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to recognize the 8th Premier of the Northwest Territories, Mr. Stephen Kakfwi, who was in the gallery today. I'm not sure if he still is. In addition to being Premier, he survived as a Cabinet Minister for 16 years. I'd also like to welcome Kyla Kakfwi-Scott, the Deputy Secretary in the Premier's office, and her daughter, Sadea. So I'm happy to welcome all 3 generations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. If we've missed anyone in the gallery today, welcome to your chambers. I hope you're enjoying the proceedings. It's always nice to see people in the gallery and watch the hardworking members. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if I had a longer member statement, I could probably talk for hours on this particular subject, but that said, there were a lot of concerns I did want to raise, and hence the oral question period. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, one of the issues that was raised passionately about was being able to call for appointments, and the phone rings and rings and rings, finally takes a message, and it takes days for someone to reply, if they reply. Some constituents have complained that no one even calls them back. Mr. Speaker, even my email to the Minister highlighting this took over 5 weeks to show up for a response to what they're doing. So my question is what is the Minister doing about the health care problems with respect to accessibility by calling in for appointments? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Yellowknife Centre. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this issue has been on the books now and on the radar since, it's more happened more so when the lab changes happen, that we do not have the technology within the hospital that allows for calls to be in queue and all that. And so there is work going on between NTHSSA is working with, I think it's infrastructure or TSC, to ensure that this issue is being rectified. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions, member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, around the concerns of accessibility, when a person gets through or doesn't get through, they finally just show up and find out they can't get appointments for weeks or months. Mr. Speaker, what is the Minister doing again about in-person now accessibility to see a doctor? Thank you.
Member from Yellowknife Centre. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will take the member, and we've heard this in Yellowknife that this has been an issue, and we've just recently moved into the new building this summer and started the primary care clinic. There are going to be wrinkles that come out. As for appointments, if there are, I can bring this back to NTHSSA to find out further information or what's the wait times or how. And I've had other people come and say the opposite, saying that they are able to get appointments, they are able to get walk-in appointments. So I will follow up with the NTHSSA to see where we're at with wait lists or how long it is to get an appointment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I'll certainly look forward to what I'm being told, looking forward to the minister's response and further that question. The other issue is, of course, accessibility to their information, Mr. Speaker. So, of course, the minister did say they've moved in there, but it's been 5 months. The next problem, of course, is, as I said, accessibility of medical records. Patients aren't getting their records referred to South, and they can't get the responses from their needs, from their tests, etc. So what can the minister do to improve those rates, and does she track them? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Yellowknife Centre. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, though that level of information on record moving is very operational, and right now what we do know, and I've mentioned it in this House before, that our systems do not communicate with Alberta, where a lot of our referrals go. So there is work going on right now to, and I mentioned it in previous sessions, that we are looking to upgrade the EMR, electronic medical record system, within the Northwest Territories. And with all of those options that have been raised by members, have been highlighted as things that we need to ensure that when we look to building a new electronic medical record system in the Northwest Territories, that it's going to have all of those components in it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Final supplementary. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just quickly, another clinic in town here, you can dial in and get your records through the internet, obviously. I'm old, I say dial, but stream. Mr. Speaker, the dental clinic does phone follow-ups and check-ins, Mr. Speaker. Why is the technology so available, Mr. Speaker? I want to know what the minister is doing. I want to know what the serious blockage is, why a dental office can do services the healthcare system can't do, why a local medical clinic can do services, again, $1 billion department can't seem to manage. Thank you.
Thank you, Member from Yellowknife Centre. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we do know that there is technology out there. It's how are we going to implement it across the Northwest Territories, and that is what that's why we are looking at the EMR. We're not just going to look at it in one section in one region, as that's what we've done in the past, and then they don't even talk together. So we have to look at it as how we're going to roll it out throughout the Northwest Territories. And in the meantime, that one of the other barriers is some of this technology has to go through these privacy issues. Is it safe enough to use for health information? So these are issues that arise when we even to try and have a booking system online. There's so many layers that have to make sure that there's going to be no breach to this system to breach private health records. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Great Slate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As we are in the capital budget process, we're all aware that there is no new money for a new Yellowknife Polytech campus. So can the minister please explain why the issue of locating a campus on Tin Can Hill has been silent after much fanfare in 2023? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Great Slave. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the member continuing to bring up the concerns of her residents and around Tin Can Hill for much of the last 10 months. The Tin Can Hill site was originally identified for proposed Yellowknife North Slave campus for Aurora College. The site is currently owned by the City of Yellowknife, so some work needed to be done to assess whether or not it was an appropriate location to consider. So prior to any potential land transfer, an environmental site assessment was required to be done. There was a phase 1 that was done. At the completion of phase 1, it was recommended that more information was needed. So phase 2 was initiated. Of course, phase 2 with evacuation last year, the sampling that was required couldn't all happen last year. And so there was a delay in that process. That process was completed this summer, and a series of technical reports were produced. And what I'm waiting for now is all of those technical report information to be consolidated, and then look forward to being able to publicly share that information. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, you know, the minister told me last fall that the ESA would be ready in March 2024, and then it was May 2024, and now it's nearly November. In more recent conversations, the minister has asked me to reach out to the board to ask more questions about the specifics, but then the board turned around and told me to talk to EC. So that's why we're here today. Regardless, however the ESA turns out, however the technical reports turns out, positive or negative for development, what is the intent for the MOU with the city? Will we terminate the MOU, or will we just delay a choice over and over and over again? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Great Slave, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will admit that there are some fine lines between what decisions remain with the N.W.T. and what decisions will ultimately be the Board of Governors for Aurora College. So I will acknowledge the member's frustration in that, but I'm happy to continue that conversation. The phase 2 of the site assessment is now done. It is highly technical information that, I'm going to be honest, that is something that I need to be able to work with the experts within multiple departments in order to understand what is required so that I can make sure that I'm passing along accurate information to the member. So phase 2 is now done. All partners involved in that being the Aurora College board, the City of Yellowknife, and also the N.W.T. will ensure that everybody is receiving the same information so that we can ensure that we're working together to communicate that information. I want to apologize to the member for the delay in that, but also want to ensure that we have accurate information that we are able to share publicly. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Great Slave.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I'll reiterate my question perhaps in a different way. If the environmental site assessment and all of the technical work shows that there is contamination and remediation needed on the site, will ECE terminate the MOU? Thank you.
Member from Great Slave, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, ultimately the decision of where the North Slave campus will go rests with the Board of Governors. So I would need to make sure that I'm getting direction from the Board of Governors as to whether or not they would like to hold on to that site or see that MOU go. But for right now, I don't have that information because that's not a decision that rests with the N.W.T. It's a decision that ultimately rests with the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Final supplementary. Member from Great Slave.
Yes, but as I said in my member statement, the board then threw it back to you and I asked them the same question. Many Yellowknifers believe there was inadequate public consultation, a flawed site options analysis for this location. Will ECE commit to adequate public consultation and a transparent site evaluation process? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Great Slave. Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hear the member. I heard the member's statement. I hear the member's concerns that of her constituents that she continues to raise. The intent of doing the site assessments was to determine whether or not the site was even to begin viable for a North Slave campus. And so, as always, there is a commitment to keep the public informed, to seek meaningful input on decisions that absolutely may affect residents of the Northwest Territories. And so I want to recognize and acknowledge that the Tin Can Hill is obviously a site that's very important to the residents of Yellowknife and the Northwest Territories. and that should any further steps be taken beyond once the conclusion of the environmental site assessment and that information is made public, then for sure there would absolutely be public engagement that would occur. I think it's worthwhile here, Mr. Speaker, informing this House and members of the public that while I have oversight over post-secondary, I do not have oversight over the operations of Aurora College. The Board of Governors does maintain that control. And while it is my authority to open and close campuses on the recommendation of the Board of Governors, ultimately where within a community that piece of property resides is the authority of the Board of Governors. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Oral questions. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my questions are for the Minister of ITI. When we're looking at workforce planning for capital projects, what analysis are we employing to help us plan to ensure that we're maximizing northern employment? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Frame Lake. Minister of Investment, Tourism and Industry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Finance has a number of procurement practices, and the strongest one being the business incentive policy that is used for procurement practices with all N.W.T procurement. Thank you.
Minister of ITI. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, respectfully, I'm asking about workforce planning, not necessarily procurement. When we're looking at workforce planning for capital projects, so planning out how this project is going to be implemented in such a way and what needs to be done to ensure that there is a workforce to implement the project, a northern workforce, what analysis are we employing to help us plan to ensure we're maximizing northern employment? Sorry to repeat the question, Mr. Speaker, but I just felt that the answer was speaking more to procurement than employment.
From Frame Lake, Minister of ITI.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd say one of the strongest workforce planning documents and tools that we use within the Government of the Northwest Territories is our Skills for Success document. And that document has it acts as kind of a Bible, if you will, of what jobs are and will be in demand over the course of the next 20 years in the Northwest Territories. So that document works by looking at, what are the expected capital infrastructure happenings in the Northwest Territories and what skill sets are we going to need. So that talks about positions in leadership. It talks about trades positions. It's identified 20 different trades positions that we will need. Thankfully, earlier today we were able to celebrate 33 new journey persons in the Northwest Territories as well. In addition to that, we also have plans like, for example, the revitalization of the Great Slave Lake fisheries. So in addition to our Skills for Success, we also have very specific documents within different sectors, and those documents have deliverables as well. So for example, ECE and ITI teamed up on that one. ECE was able to offer subsidies, ITI was able to offer grants, and we were able to really work to make some great change in that sector over the last few years. And so there is a primary document, but also very sector-specific ones as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of ITI. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a much more comprehensive answer and more along the lines of what I was looking for. Mr. Speaker, considering these plans that we have in place across sectors, why aren't we making more progress on increasing northern employment figures at the diamond mines, projects like Giant Mine, or even N.W.T contracted projects? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Frame Lake. Minister of ITI.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I guess there's a couple different ways that I can answer this question. I'm not trying to be evasive of the member at all. I think there's a few different ways that we can kind of interpret these questions. But within the examples to say of Diamond Mine, fly in, fly out work is not for everyone. I know over the course of the last 2 decades, a lot of people who started working in diamond mining aren't necessarily there. Some have chosen to return to employment in their communities or return to life at home. But certainly a fly in, fly out isn't for anyone. or everyone. One piece of good news is that a lot of the advanced project mining are on existing road infrastructure or around and centered around communities. So for example, Pine Point, people will be able to drive to mine sites. We're looking at or hearing about good news about gold mining close to Yellowknife. We're hearing about a mining project close to Fort Simpson. And so that will really change the dynamic that currently exists at a lot of our bigger mines in the Northwest Territories. Some work that is being done in order to improve some of our numbers in the Northwest Territories as well are looking at things like our curriculum renewal. We're making sure that we are focused on affording students the education that they want in order to meet our desire to see as many Northerners employed in these projects. And also working with organizations like the Mine Training Society and DevCorps as well to make sure that it really is everybody working together at the end of the day to connect people to the training opportunities that do exist in the Northwest Territories. We have a number of training programs and subsidies within the Department of Education, Culture and Employment, and we want to make sure ultimately that people are taking advantage of them because we really do want to see Northerners successful in the workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of ITI. Final supplementary, member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate again the comprehensive answer from the minister. I always appreciate these exchanges where we go back and forth like this and get these comprehensive answers on the table. Regarding Pine Point, I'm glad she brought that one up because the Standing Committee for Economic and Development recently met with some representatives from Pine Point, and they were saying one of their big challenges is going to be finding employees to staff this mine, that we're simply not producing the numbers of tradespeople that they're going to need. So I guess what I would ask the minister is how can we move the needle on this? How can we ensure that we are preparing Northerners to enter the workforce, to shift into positions that are available in the workforce so that we don't have this problem of creating economic activity that Northerners can't benefit from? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Frame Lake, Minister of ITI.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very thankful for this question. I had the opportunity in June to travel with a number of deputy ministers down to the Pine Point mine site where we had an incredible tour of what was there before, what they envision being there tomorrow and years down the road. The good news here is that we've got a few years to put together the tradespeople that they need. One of the things that I asked them for on that tour was their workforce planning document of exactly what tradespeople that they will need. So that we can make sure that we're supporting that in the Northwest Territories. One of the key things that we need here, Mr. Speaker, is employers who can support tradespeople. So that is employers that can support our SNAP students. If you are a Red Seal journey person in the Northwest Territories and you can support a student whether you live in Yellowknife and hopefully outside of Yellowknife as well, we need employers to be able to support these students so that we can grow more tradespeople. That is the number one thing I would say today that I need is the support of employers so that we can get more people trained up and through the system. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of ITI. Colleagues, we've had 3 sets of questions and we spent 20 minutes on answers and preamble. Please be succinct in your questions and succinct in your answers. Thank you very much. Oral questions. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to my statement on the winter road preparations for this coming season for the Sawtooth, and I must remind the House it's an annual resupply. And so my first question to the Minister of Infrastructure, when can the Minister of Infrastructure to be available to meet the project contractors participants to engage in preparation discussions similar to last year? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from the Sawtooth. Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would expect, I expect it that the officers and the project officers in the department, officials there are already doing that. They've certainly been expected to do that for some time. We know that there's going to be more traffic on those winter roads this season, just as there was last season when there was less barges. with no barges, fully expecting that road to be busy. So those meetings are already underway. Mr. Speaker, it was helpful for me to meet with some of those involved last year, just to get a real picture of it, to have that opportunity. I'm certainly happy to do that again, and can work with the MLA for the region and for perhaps from the Nahende region, since folks are coming through that area as well. And we want to make sure we're maximizing everyone's ability to get as much through that winter road as possible. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Member from Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Minister for that reply. In addition to my statement of cargo and fuel and essential services going into the Sawtooth, we've got another developer that's going to be coming there to the Sawtooth to do some activity around the Cold Lake area. I'm not too sure if the Minister is aware of that, but that'll be additional traffic. My next question, will the Minister confirm this pre-seasonal pre-job meeting, if that can be held in Norman Wells? This will give us, I plan to attend, and other opportunities for other engagements. Must you, Mr. Speaker?
Member from the Sawtooth, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can confirm on behalf of the department that someone's going to be there. There's no question that some representatives, senior representatives from the department can go. I want to just double check my own calendar. I've got commitments already to a couple of other regions where I've been waiting to get to. So look, certainly best efforts on my part. I'm always happy to go back. I've been to Norman Wells here a couple of times already in this government. Happy to go back. If I can't be there in person, I'll certainly make sure that I'm available in some other means. But I also wouldn't want to delay having that in person there in the region based on my calendar. So someone will be available to make sure we're there, and as I say, I'll make my best efforts. But it was a helpful meeting we had last year. We're going to need to do more this year, and so I want to emphasize we all want to work together and have a task force that's moving this ahead. Thank you.
Member from Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Minister for that willingness to participate. I feel comfortable already that we'll have a safe discussion. My next question, will the Minister support more resources as similar actions taken last year during our January discussion to ensure that we have a suitable, durable road surface for the heavy truck traffic? Masi.
From the Sawtooth, Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, absolutely. We will have to prioritize that work again. Just by way of some example, what we did last year, we were widening the road that gave the ability for trucks to be going, but also didn't impede smaller traffic with folks who may be doing their own personal resupply, had more signage, increased patrols, increased checkpoints, which are not only a safety issue, it helps increase the flow of traffic and make the flow of traffic better. We've also had increased maintenance, increased improvements. Again, everything we can do to keep the road in a state that people can continue to pass. Mr. Speaker, that worked well last time. We had positive feedback. We'll take any constructive feedback on that as well if folks have it available, so we can continue to make it even better this year. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Final supplementary. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the final supplementary. I feel very assured here. The winter before, it took our department and traffic to go 5 hours for 90 miles, 90 kilometers. So you can do the calculations on the speed limit. Last year was excellent. My last question there, Mr. Speaker, is this industry is challenged by a shortage of drivers, particularly experienced winter road drivers. What active measures or efforts the Department of Infrastructure is doing to support that industry? Thank you.
Member from the Sawtooth, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This certainly is a challenge. It's a challenge across industry, but given the situation we're in, we are trying to bring in more licensed drivers. Some of that backlog, I will say, a bit of a plug for folks who are looking to get their licenses as new drivers. If they want to take a driver's course first, that might reduce the number of repeat customers that we have over at the DMV. But with respect to those that are looking to be professional drivers, that's a different category. They're struggling with the same issue in that we have the same limited number of people doing the licensing exams. I can say, knowing what's coming, knowing the pressures that we're in for supply, we are opening up additional appointments here from the end of this month and into next month. Doing that by ensuring that we're maximizing folks within our department with these skill sets and looking to ensure that all of the positions are filled and try to do everything we can to fill those positions quickly so that we can address the existing backlog to get more drivers licensed and move supplies where we need to. Thank you.
Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So my questions are for the Minister of Health and Social Services. Based on the Minister's experience as a nurse, as a regular MLA for 4 years, sitting over on this side, and now as Health Minister, can she confirm from her experience whether the problem exists, whether the problem of healthcare shift workers not being allowed to take the full leave that they're entitled to? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North, the Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, within the healthcare system, there are areas where health practitioners have to provide 24-hour care, and within that healthcare system, those practitioners and nurses, they fall under, unionized employees, and there are allotted time based on their years of service. So the longer employees have way more time, and we've heard, and I know there is an acknowledgement within the health authority that within that 24-hour care model that sometimes it's unfortunate, but that not everybody can access all of their leaves due to operational requirements. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think it's a great first start to just acknowledge that there's a problem. And understanding that health authority is an independent authority, is the Minister aware of whether policies are being reviewed around when and how frontline staff can take leave, or will she request that those policies be reviewed? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yellowknife North, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what I can commit and say that what has been committed to by the Stanton is that the policy that is within Stanton for leave is going to or is being reviewed currently. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Services. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That's a good first start. Would the minister agree that when someone applies for leave, there should be a deadline for either approving or denying that leave that gives reasonable notice for that person so that they might plan their leave? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Speaker, Mr. Speaker, those employees that are unionized employees, they have, that when they apply for leave, it is the expectation that as the employer that they do follow the collective agreement. So 18.02-2 brackets 2 does speak to that. And so it gives them 2 weeks to respond to any employee that puts in leave. And if there are scheduling needs that need to be done in advance, that those employers notify the union, and that they still have to have a set date as to when leave is put in, and they still have to follow a 2-week. And they have to respond in writing in the reasons why if they're declined. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Final supplementary, member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So will the minister commit to ensuring that a plan is developed to enable healthcare staff to take all their leave, to address policies and planning procedures in the short term, and over the longer term to address chronic understaffing? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do, and I will, and I have communicated this to the NTHSSA and to the other health authorities, and so that way that we do have a plan in place, and that, when people can't get their leave, as many members said, that it does impact them. So thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member for Moultrie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when the swimming pool in Edsel burned down, there was insufficient insurance proceeds to rebuild the swimming pool due to newer building standards. The replacement cost, even with limited insurance, was something that community government could not afford. To make this matter worse, the insurance payout was less if you do not rebuild within 3 years. Therefore, I want to ask the minister, can the minister commit to trying to find funds for the Betchacon swimming pool? Thank you.
Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The territorial government supplies or funds communities through our community funding. It's up to the communities whether or not they want to utilize some of that funding for things like the pools or for like pools. However, the government doesn't build pools or operate pools for communities. So it's up, at the end of the day, it's up to the community whether or not they want to use their own revenues or go out to other sources of funding for building such facilities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Member for Moultrie.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, with the CPI cutbacks, it's not possible to do that. So that's why I asked the minister, so can the minister work with other government or charities to fund our swimming pool? Thank you.
Member for Moultrie. Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know that the regional staff have worked with the community governments on their funding and how they can utilize it. However, at this time, it's not our responsibility as a government to go out and look for funding for communities for infrastructure like this. If the government is looking for resources and assistance on maybe what funding could be available, I'm sure the department would be willing and working with the community to look for those funding sources. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Member for Moultrie.
I'm sure this one he can do. He's got a lot of staff. There's a lot of staffs that are out there. Can the minister commit to supporting community governments in the Cleacher region for writing grants and planning swimming pool projects? There's a lot of staff out there, so I'm asking the minister if he would commit. Thank you.
Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Municipal and Community Affairs, unfortunately, does not have a lot of staff, and I know that we do have staff available that could potentially assist with the community. So I think it's best if the community reaches out to the regional superintendent, so that maybe resources could be found if we have them available. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Final supplementary. Member for Moultrie.
Speaker, territorial government hired recently like 1,600 employees within the last few years. I'm sure those people can do something. They must be useful for something, to do something for the community. So I'm just asking the minister, or I don't know who, maybe for finance, but in the supplementary budget, is it possible to divert money for a swimming pool in the Cleacher region? Thank you.
Member from Moultrie, your questions were to the Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs, so I'm going to turn that question to him. Should you have another set of questions, you can reach it out to the Finance Minister. Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish I had all those employees. At the end of the day, I think we have to realize not all these employees are indeterminate full-time employees that are working, they're term employees, there's relief workers. So at the end of the day, we don't have those employees to assist with the community right now. Any other questions like that, I guess, would have to go to the Minister of Finance. Thank you.
Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Member from Great Slee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to ask a second round of questions to the Minister of ECE. Will the minister work with the board, the college board, to conduct a robust public consultation process for site selection? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member from Great Slave, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm always happy to respond to the board anytime they reach out to me. It would certainly depend on whether or not the board was welcoming of that, but I will support the board any way that I can and any way that works well for us. But I certainly can't dictate to the board how they choose to do their operations. Thank you.
Member from Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, can the minister make the technical reports she spoke of earlier today publicly available? There are members in my community who would like to review them. Thank you.
Member from Great Slave, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know that some form of report from the environmental site assessments will be made public, and I look forward to ensuring that I share that with the member once it is out there.
Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can specifically the scientific reports be made publicly available? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Great Slave, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I will have to check in with the department that actually owns those reports. It is not ECE that owns those reports at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Final supplementary, member from Great Slave.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I don't know how many ways to ask it, so I'll pass along.
Could you please stand?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nothing further.
Oral questions. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in a healthcare worker I spoke to about the recent round of engagements within the system, the minister's undertaking and the authority's undertaking, he's said, quote, "We don't need more opportunities for feedback. The reason healthcare workers don't feel heard is because there's never any real action or bold moves on the feedback we've given for years." So I'd like to ask the Minister of Health today, in these town halls that she's having with healthcare workers, what is she hearing? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I, and alongside with the CEO and the Deputy Minister, as well as the COO of Stanton, had a town hall for Stanton staff. So we did not have one for the Yellowknife region as of yet, which the primary care falls under. What we heard were a lot of operational issues. We also heard a lot of even just internal, how like funding for different things within. We did hear leave, and that's where the commitment was made to review the policy. There is a sense of frustration, and I acknowledge that. And so what we are taking away from that first town hall that we had with Stanton is to compile everything. The one thing that we'll do is that we will, it's now the minister's office has heard from the staff, the department has heard from the staff, the CEO has heard from the staff, the COO has heard from the staff. So we are going to be following up back with looping that back to the staff as to where we are with following up. Some of them were easy fixes and we're committed to right on the fly during those meetings. We'll continue to have those meetings throughout the territory. Some may say that they're not the all and be all for everybody, but they are one voice where I'm able to hear what the concerns are, as well as the CEO and as many people, as the Minister of Health and Social Services, the NTHSSA is the operations, and they do have a governing council. And with that, I have to go work through and with the governing council in order to, to know what's going on and with the direction that they're giving. So this is a better way for me to really hear and in partnership to be able to work with them in looping that information back around and providing me with areas where I can then be more holding them account to that. Thank you.
Health and Social Services. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is the Governing Council joining the Minister on these listening sessions? Thank you.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you. As Stanton is a territorial hospital, it doesn't fall within one of the regional wellness. So each of the regions have a COO, and then they have a council, a regional wellness council that has a chair. And so what I have within Stanton, we did not have the chair of the governing council at this meeting. But we do plan to have the chairs of the regional wellness as well as the COOs and the CEO and the deputy minister moving forward with all of the other regions because they do have chairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking for accountability as well, and I hear this refrain that it's the governance council that's in charge. It's not the minister. There's only so much she can do. So why are we not bringing the governing council to listen to these meetings? It doesn't matter if it's Stanton. They're responsible for the entire thing. The individual wellness council is fine, but the overall management of the system and oversight of the system is one body. So why are they not being involved with this effort?
You're here.
From Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the chair of each of the Regional Wellness Council is a member of the Governing Council. So that is the Governing Council. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Final supplementary. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the workers are looking for bold action. They're looking for a clear commitment. So what is the minister's idea for how to solve this problem? What's the clear commitment and deliverable that she can give hope to workers that things are going to get better and improve? Thank you.
Member from Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned before, that we are, as this whole year I've been working with the Governing Council and working with the members, hearing from the members, hearing from the public. It's not that I don't sit here on having deaf ears. I know that there are real issues within our healthcare system. There are real issues that people are sicker and that we need serious. And so I hear the members. And yes, there are things that we are looking into. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Wolfe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, for Finance. I know that from the budget, we know that the government of the Northwest Territories have over 6,000 employees and over 4,000 positions are located in Yellowknife. We don't even know what some of these people are doing because maybe many of those positions, we know many of those positions are duplicate. Maybe N.W.T can hire a consultant to help small communities to apply for programs, for programs in the small communities, such as a swimming pool or other recreation facilities, because many of these communities lack a lot of recreations. We need recreation programs for our youth. So with that in mind, I want to ask the minister, N.W.T has many projects that are funded by the federal government. Can the minister work with other government or charities to fund projects like our swimming pool? Thank you.
Thank you, Member for Mofi. Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, first, with respect to the fulsomeness of the public service, a lot of the growth in the last little while has actually been in the Department of Health and Social Services. A lot of other growth has actually been as a result of Jordan's principal funding, which is allowing additional services in EC&E. And that said, there is a very active conversation happening, led with the Department of Finance, Human Resources, around ensuring that we don't have positions that are sitting unfilled, that are not being fully utilized, and with a view to having those positions taken off the books so that they don't artificially or inappropriately inflate the numbers. it doesn't answer the end of the question, which is to what extent there can be some supports to communities to help increase their recreational capacity. Mr. Speaker, that I think is a shared goal of many people in this House, including ministers here. It's not one that I can come up with a solution standing here. I'm happy to sit down with the member with Human Resources perspective and with the Minister of MACA and see if there's ways that we can support communities so that they can use the funding that they have to achieve their goals. Thank you.
Minister of Finance. Member from Moultrie.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure the deputy ministers are listening out there, Stan. They're listening right now. So what I would like to ask the minister is that this question that I asked the MACA minister. In the supplementary budget, is it possible to divert money for a swimming pool in the Cleacher region? Thank you.
Member from Moultrie. Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, nobody likes a short answer when it just says no, but unfortunately this instance the short answer is no. The supplementary estimates are, they come forward as having been gone through the Financial Management Board to bring about issues or things that arise. One example is the collective agreement that was finalized, so this comes forward to bring the collective agreement in. I have to obviously comply with the collective agreement. Another major item in there was fire suppression funding. We have to pay the bill for our fire suppression funding. Another big one in there, Mr. Speaker, is commitments made in the House for the main estimates. So the supplementary estimates right now aren't going to be the place where we can just move that money around. But Mr. Speaker, there are funds. I know the Minister of MACA already spoke to work in his department. I know the Minister of MACA wants to see supports to communities. Again, my suggestion is that we all sit down and see if there's a way to ensure that the money that's for communities is being effectively used by them. I know as Minister, I have funds that sit in infrastructure that we want to see go out the door to communities. And if they're not going out the door, that is a problem we want to solve. Thank you.
Minister of Finance. Member from Moultrie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I'm sure they can find a way to do this, and this government is good at hiring consultant. You know, if they hire a consultant, they can. If there's a well, there's a way. So they can find money to help our neighbors, to help their neighbor. So it's more of a comment. I don't have any more questions, so I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Please ask the questions. I don't need the preambles. Thank you very much. Oral questions. Member from Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for this opportunity for another question. My question today is to the Minister of Housing. We have a beautiful building there in Toledo, the Toledo fourplex, that was transferred ownership to this government. It was designated for health staff, but it's currently not ready, and that ownership was transferred the beginning of the summer. And I would like to know if what measures is the housing minister taking to make it occupied for the health staff, so that'll release the current building for the teachers. Mussy.
The Sawtooth. Member for Housing N.W.T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. The fourplex in Toledo has been transferred over to health for use for the nursing staff in Toledo. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health or Housing N.W.T. Member from Sawtooth.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Health. No, I'll wait for another opportunity. Thank you, Mussy.
Member from the Sawtooth. Please, questions, because I got a whole list of people that want to still get on the second one. Members, oral questions. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health and Social Services. Doctors are complaining about not being able to provide timely and effective feedback with respect to the structure of the system and the problems they see. Primary care doctors, more specifically, have proposed initiatives. I'm asking, what forum does the minister allow good conversations and discussions about proposals that doctors are providing that can help save the healthcare system? Thank you.
From Yellowknife Centre, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, within the NTHSSA, the primary care sits within NTHSSA, and the doctors work within the NTHSSA. And so the doctors have, they have the medical director, they have the territorial medical director, they have the COO, they have the CEO, and they have the governing council. So they have very many levels that if they're not being heard, they have very many levels. And if and if they're still not being heard after they've gone all the way up to the governing council, then that's when the discussions between myself and the governing council can happen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate that answer from the Minister, but when the doctors are suggesting to open up the CT scan system and creating avenues to help patient care and expedite it in the sense of service and save money, it's going on deaf ears. So what next if no one seems to care about the advice and direction offered by doctors, especially our primary care doctors? Thank you.
From Yellowknife Centre, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, as that is very operational questions, that is the first time I've heard that issue. So that would be something that I would recommend them to be raising with the COO and the CEO. Thank you.
Health and Social Services. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are more concerns, and apparently that's been highlighted many times, and I think even another MLA has pointed out scheduling. These doctors are saying they could provide suggestions through efficiency and management of time by doing their own scheduling, and they're reaching to the point that they're considering leaving, if not some have already left. Maybe we could start with the first clarity on this particular issue is how many primary care doctors do we have in Yellowknife and working in the Stanton Hospital? Thank you.
Member from Yellowknife Centre, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'll have to get back to the member on that. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Following the supplementary. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've been made aware that it's close to 5 or 6 doctors have either left or just recently have given their notice of leaving. I'd like that to be confirmed with respect to the numbers I've asked a few moments ago. Is the minister aware of this, and what is she doing about it? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Yellowknife Centre, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this conversation that has come up in the House, it came up yesterday, and and it has. Many people come within our system, and we are doing exit interviews to find out why, and we are using the data to change the way that we're engaging with staff or retention. So with what I can say is that I don't get notified whenever there's a healthcare person or a doctor within the whole Northwest Territories that is hired or has left. So therefore, if the member wants to know, I was willing to share with the member yesterday the variance, like when staff are, and physicians, I can provide that to the member. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, right now we have a system that competes with itself, as I said. This is not coming from my analysis. This is coming from healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, allied healthcare professionals. Why has the choice been made to prioritize locum contracts, temporary workers, and agency nurses over full-time staff? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there has been no prioritize on locum workers or agency workers. Mr. Speaker, we have to follow the collective agreement. We cannot bargain outside the collective agreement on indeterminate employees, and therefore, which leaves us, if we don't have any indeterminate employees, then we have to go to the next steps, which we go for terms, and then if it impacts units being closed, then we would discuss that with the union and get the consent to be able to look at agencies. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, is the minister willing to look at the length of contracts A 6-month contract means the worker's going to stay in the Northwest Territories for at least a longer time commitment. We're talking about contracts that are 2 days long, that are a week long. Will the minister commit to stopping that practice and ensuring contracts are long enough to keep people in the North and keep money in the North and keep continuity of care in the North? Thank you.
From Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, you know, I can commit to having that conversation again with the NTHSSA, what their practice is. I am not familiar of how long contracts are, if they're, you know, I mean, in the past, you know, the only time I've ever seen a short enough contract in my time working in the health authority was within, you know, maybe over Christmas so that we didn't have to shut down services. So maybe a 2 or 3 week contract. But, you know, as it is now, we are struggling with staffing, and whether members in this House or anywhere, you know, we don't know exactly how long this is going to be throughout Canada. We don't know, and you know, this is a priority. This is a priority not just for me, it's a priority for Canada. It's a priority that we are going to be discussing at the next health ministers meeting, because it is an issue. It is an issue across Canada. We are struggling to find and retain health care providers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Health and Social Services. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Canadian government is pumping billions of dollars into healthcare right now. This is not, this problem is a northern problem. So what's the minister's northern solution? Thank you.
Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, the Canadian government may be pumping millions into healthcare, but it's not only even at the health minister's table now, it is at the premier's. You know, the premiers are discussing the health, because it is not sustainable. Our healthcare budgets in all of the territories and provinces are not sustainable. And so there are issues throughout Canada. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Final supplementary, member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that number is $200 billion over 10 years. So I appreciate that it's going to be divvied out in different places. We need to have a resolution to this. We need to find a way to retain workers. This is a blockage that's been identified to me. Will the minister at least commit to doing an exploration of this, working with staff, working with the whole team? Hear, hear. And coming up with a solution that's meaningful, impactful, and will actually solve this problem instead of just more listening exercises. Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, during my time as the minister so far within this year, you know, we have excellent staff, you know, and yes, they are tired, and yes, there are, you know, very, not just at Stanton, in the regions, you know, you most recently hear about, in the regions we have, you know, obstetrics closures, we have nursing stations that are on emergency services, and so what we're, you know, like what we're trying to do is we're looking at it as a whole of territory, because as I said in the very beginning, this is a whole of territory issue, and Stanton is our territorial hospital, and it is at the brink. And the members are correct. The members in Yellowknife have raised this, and the people in Yellowknife have raised this. But the issue, you know, from Yellowknife is all of the people that are coming in from the small community. So we still need to look at what is going on elsewhere else, so that way there's not such the burden on the territorial health system in Yellowknife. And so that is what I'm committed to do. I am committed to working within our structures. I am committed to working with looking at my legislation to see the authorities that I have over the healthcare system, and working with the rest of the members in this House. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Oral questions. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I appreciated the answers I got earlier from the Minister of ECE, and note that she kind of finished on the point she needs support from ministry. Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about what we are doing. Mr. Speaker, let's connect the dots. Education outcomes. Will the minister speak to the education outcomes and how that's relating to our inability to sufficiently provide a workforce for industry in the territory? Thank you.
Thank you. Member from Frame Lake, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I feel like by the question, the member already knows the answer. Absolutely. Our education outcomes are linked to employment at 100%. And this is why within the Northwest Territories we're doing things like looking at the ELCC program in conjunction with the Government of Canada and making sure that our ELCC service providers have education and certification that they need in order to provide support at the 0 to age 4 level. Then we're looking at our curriculum renewal. We're switching to the BC curriculum, which is also going to help out. We were looking at, our students need school-based mental health and wellness because they need to be mentally cared for in order to be able to learn at the end of the day. So this is a huge focus of mine. The other piece around this is our review of the Education Act, which is also taking place in this assembly. And then there is also, of course, the new post-secondary education legislation that was passed in last assembly to make sure that the post-secondary education that is being offered to Northerners is quality education, so that we can ensure that we have a robust workforce at the end of the day, and it is absolutely all connected. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I guess where I'm a bit confused is, when I look at education outcomes, workforce planning, let's focus on the Giant Mine project for a second. That project is only achieving 36% employment. This is a project that's going to be spending billions of dollars in the territory over a number of years. Why have we failed to maximize Northern workforce in that project if all these plans are working so well? What's the missing piece, Mr. Speaker?
Frame Lake, Minister of Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it's worth saying that this project is led by the federal government. We do not, as the N.W.T, hold the reins on this project. I think that it is an accumulation of everything that I have mentioned here today. It is also a matter of making sure that projects are right-sized for the Northwest Territories, which I know, in having sat down with one of the key leaders on that project, that they are doing what they can to make sure that projects are broken down, and they do have a focus of Northern procurement. However, they do work within the federal system, and the federal system, I think we have some room to work together to make sure that our procurement rules align and that our goals at the end of the day align as well. So I think there's always room for improvement in the territory, and I think we should always maintain our drive and desire to always do better. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, does the Department of ECE or ITI have stated goals for the for workforce, increasing the Northern workforce in the territory? Have they set a number that they're trying to achieve, either at the diamond mines, Giant, through Northern, through our contracting? Are they looking to achieve a goal?
Directed to one minister, not though she has the two different roles. I'm going to turn it to you as the Minister for Education, Culture and Employment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with all of our mining projects, our diamond mining projects, we do have socioeconomic agreements, which in them do contain northern employment goals in them. So that is baked into a lot of what we do in the territory, and it is always our goal to ensure that our industry in the Northwest Territories is serving and benefiting Northerners. Thank you.
Minister of Education, Culture and Employment. Final supplementary. Colleagues, our time has come to the end. Before we do that, I'd like to welcome the students from Sir John Franklin's High School for attending here. They got to watch a lively debate, and thank you very much for being here today. Oral questions, written questions, returns to written questions, replies to Commissioner's address, petitions, petitions, reports on committee reports on committee on the review of bills, reports on committee of the review of bills, reports on standing and special committees. Member from Nunavut-Bootleg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, your Standing Committee on Accountability and Oversight is pleased to provide its report on the committee's statement on the housing and healthcare crisis in the Northwest Territories and commends it to the House. Mr. Speaker, this report sets out the Accountability and Oversight Committee's concerns and call for urgent government intervention regarding the crisis conditions that have developed in the delivery of healthcare and social services and affordability and availability of housing across the Northwest Territories. Through correspondence before the fall sitting, committee issued the following statement to their cabinet counterparts. The Standing Committee on Accountability and Oversight is committed to upholding the 4 priorities of the 20th Legislative Assembly, which are the suitability, accessibility, and affordability of housing, a strong economic foundation, access to health care and addressing the effects of trauma, and safe residents and communities. Mr. Speaker, committee has become increasingly concerned with the crisis conditions that continue to develop in the delivery of health and social services and the affordability and availability of housing in the N.W.T. After thorough consideration, committee is not able to support a capital plan while the top priorities of the 20th Legislative Assembly still require urgent attention, action, and associated funding. We have heard from our constituents, frontline staff, and practitioners that our primary healthcare system is seeing unsustainable challenges. We are calling on the government to make immediate changes and adopt a more staff-centric approach that will incorporate the input of our critical healthcare staff and frontline workers, protect their mental health, and show them that they are valued. We are requesting a fundamental culture shift, which we acknowledge may need to include changes made to the foundational governance and accountability structure. Mr. Speaker, we also wish to see adequate supports given to youth mental health and other HSS services, such as therapeutic and diagnostic supports. Failure to solve these problems impacts our capacity to deliver services and our fiscal sustainability goals by causing unnecessary costs to address the crisis points. Committee is concerned that Housing N.W.T. is not making significant progress on addressing the housing crisis that exists across the entire housing continuum in the Northwest Territories. Given the available data, we believe that Housing in Northwest Territories has enough information to take meaningful action to advance the creation of more housing units. We need more investment into the creation of housing units. It is not lost on committee the gravity of the position that we have taken, and would reiterate that we are urgently seeking a course correction from government with appropriate resourcing behind it that reflects both the Assembly priorities and the concerns of N.W.T. residents. Committee is very concerned about the fragility of our healthcare system and the apparent inability to put appropriate resources into housing. Committee remains dedicated to fostering a transparent and collaborative budget process. It has become clear to us that failing to fix these problems is undermining our ability to practice responsible fiscal management and puts our goals in jeopardy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we believe that by putting appropriate focus on our shared priorities, we can achieve a more prosperous and resilient future for all. We look forward to continuing this vital conversation and hope that we will see the appropriate shift during this government session. Committee understand that the capital budget is before us. However, we cannot approve the budget until we see real commitments for change and a shift in government resources that better reflects the priorities of this Assembly. This report is presented to the House as a demonstration of committee's ongoing commitment to transparency alongside a continued call for action to better and more immediately address the priorities of the 20th Legislative Assembly. Mr. Speaker, in recent discussions, it has become clear that the government's mechanisms to address the serious issues that have arisen in housing and health and social services are falling short of what is necessary to make meaningful change. As we navigate the complexities of our fiscal and policy landscape, we're reminded that it is imperative that we as a government make informed decisions that reflect the needs and values of our communities and residents. We are becoming increasingly concerned that those needs and values are not being addressed meaningfully, so we are prepared to take a strong position to urge the government to act right away. Mr. Speaker, committee observes that Housing N.W.T is not making nor plans to make significant progress on addressing the housing crisis that exists across the entire continuum of the Northwest Territories when considering the Housing N.W.T Action Plan 2022-2025. The lack of meaningful metrics and targets put forward by Housing N.W.T in their action plan make it difficult for committee or any other stakeholder to ultimately understand the capacity and capability of the organization. Mr. Speaker, committee advocates for the Housing N.W.T to use all available data and evidence now to advance the creation of new housing units across the entire housing continuum and to advance the creation and/or retrofit of housing units aggressively and ambitiously. Committee requires a far greater commitment from Cabinet to put more resources into supporting territorial housing needs. Committee is ultimately seeking a commitment to the creation of expanded housing units and resourcing behind that commitment, Mr. Speaker. In the spirit of reconciliation, committee acknowledges and supports the work done collaboratively with Indigenous governments. To that end, committee also expects that Housing N.W.T will better demonstrate and report on how they are working with and supporting the work of each Indigenous government in delivering their housing strategies. The government must support the bilateral relationship between the Indigenous governments and the federal government to ensure that additional resources can flow directly to the Indigenous communities. Mr. Speaker, finally, committee acknowledges the ongoing and serious challenges faced by municipalities and small communities who are attempting to identify land suitable for housing stock development and are finding the options limited and not suitable. As such, committee urges the Department of Environment and Climate Change to commit to and proactively pursue arrangements where bulk land transfers to municipalities can occur, including implementing transparent, clear processes to help departments and municipalities understand how they can participate. Mr. Speaker, committee maintains that any real or perceived limitations of municipalities interest of the community, community type, community legislative and administrative tools, and community capacity and resources are the concern of the municipality and will encourage ECC to not take a paternalistic approach. Mr. Speaker, the committee is aware of the increasingly unsustainable issues faced by both the Department of Health and Social Services and the Northwest Territories Health and Social Services authorities, including the indications from frontline staff and practitioners that the primary care system may be on the verge of collapse. Mr. Speaker, committee is calling the Minister of Health and Social Services to make all actions necessary to immediately intervene and stabilize primary, secondary and tertiary care. We have seen evidence that the current management model is not staff-centric, nor does it foster problem-solving or incorporate the input of our critical healthcare staff and frontline workers. We wish to see a governance and management organizational structure implemented right away that signals to staff they are valued. Mr. Speaker, a cultural shift is required that empowers our frontline staff and makes the Northwest Territories an attractive place to live and work. We know that HSS has received evidence-based observations and clear, achievable recommendations from a number of sources. For example, the March 1, 2024 correspondence from the N.W.T Medical Association, which was tabled in the House on May 28, 2024, contained organizational and systemic change recommendations. Committee calls on HSS to respond to these recommendations. Committee is also concerned that there are not adequate levels of support in schools for youth mental health and other vital health and social services, such as therapeutic and diagnostic supports for our children and young people. Mr. Speaker, committee sees evidence that not enough is being done to show appreciation and support for our healthcare staff and our frontline workers, including supporting their physical and mental health, and we call for concrete action. Committee urges more efforts to enhance recruitment and retention of healthcare frontline workers, specifically around point-of-care staff. Committee is also aware that many of our practitioners are not being supported in the face of significant challenges with critical staffing and resource shortages. For example, Mr. Speaker, we know that healthcare practitioners are regularly denied requests for annual leave, and policies related to organizational demands are interpreted and implemented in such a way that makes it challenging for staff to take the leave allotted to them. Mr. Speaker, this concludes the Standing Committee on Accountability and Oversight's report and committee statement of the housing and healthcare crisis in the Northwest Territories. In conclusion, the committee remains dedicated to fostering a transparent and collaborative capital budget process that gives the appropriate, urgent attention to our territory's top priorities. We believe that by focusing our attention to prioritize and adequately fund healthcare and housing issues, we can achieve a more prosperous and resilient future for all. The committee is very concerned about the fragility of our healthcare system and the apparent inability to put appropriate resources into housing. The committee will continue to consider the capital plan that is before us, but our concerns with operations and services are serious ones. As previously stated, the committee is not in a position to support a capital plan while we feel the top priorities of the 20th Legislative Assembly are not being addressed to the best of our abilities. Mr. Speaker, the committee is calling for a shift in resources that better reflects the priorities of the 20th Assembly. We look forward to continuing this vital conversation during the fall 2024 session. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Boot Lake. Reports on standing committee and standing and special committees. Reports of standing and special committees. Tabling of documents. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wish to table the following document, update on recommendations from Healing Voices report. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Member for Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Yellowknife Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to table a survey authored by both myself and Mr. Testart. This survey is called Your Healthcare Patient Experience in the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, I've been advised that there is a motion for table item number 13 by mistake. Minister, member from Nuvik Boot Lake.
Oversight, Mr. Speaker, not a mistake. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Range Lake, that Committee Report 15-20 brackets 1, report on committee statement on the housing and healthcare crisis in the Northwest Territories, be received by the Assembly. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Nuvik Boot Lake. Motion is in order. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion has carried and has been received and adopted by this Assembly. Table documents. Table documents. Notice of motions. Notice of motions. Sorry, motions. Notice of motions for first reading bills. Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on Tuesday, October 29th, 2024, I will present Bill 11, an act to amend the Motor Vehicles Act, to be read for the first time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Notice of motions, first reading of bills. Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on Tuesday, October 29, 2024, I will present Bill 12, Business Day Statute Law Amendment Act, to be read for the first time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Justice. Notice of motions for first reading of bills. Notice of motions, first reading of bills. First reading of bills. First reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Consideration Committee of the Whole and other matters. Table document 193-20 brackets 1 with the member from the SAW2 in the chair.
The member of Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the committee would like to consider table documents, capital estimates 2024-2025, Departments of Finance and Departments of Justice. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member. Does committee agree? Agreed. Okay, we will start after a short 8-minute break. Merci. Committee, we have agreed to consider tabled documents 193-20 capital estimates 2025-2026. Does the Minister of Finance have any opening remarks?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. We have agreed to begin with the general comments on the capital estimates. Do any member wish to make any general comments before we consider the table documents in detail? Seeing none. Thank you, members. No further general comments. We will proceed to the details of the table documents, beginning with Department of Finance. Does the Minister wish to bring witnesses into the chamber?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Does committee agree? Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses into the chamber. Would the Minister please introduce the witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, on my left, I have Bill McKay, the Deputy Minister of Finance, and on my right, Dave Heffernan, Government's Chief Information Officer.
The committee has agreed to forego general comments. Is the committee agreed to proceed to the detail contained in the table document? Agreed. Committee, the Department of Finance begins on page 33. We will defer the department totals and review the estimates by activity summary beginning on page 35. With the Chief Information Officer with information item on page 36. Are there any questions? Mr. Morris, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this is a general question, and I figured now is as good of a time as any to ask it. So, members are provided in advance, some pretty substantial project substantiation for all of these kinds of items. And my first question that came up when I was looking at those is, why are the kind of more detailed substantiations not shared publicly? It seems like information that is not, I can understand that specific numbers might need to be taken out for contract reasons, but is there a reason why the substantiations can't be made public? Because I personally can't see one. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the materials, the information that we're providing in general wouldn't have the procurement detail in it. So the procurement detail traditionally, and across a lot of different governments, not only ours, they don't want to put the number to which then bidders would simply bid to meet that budget. Again, if there's information that we're speaking to here, it typically wouldn't be considered confidential. If the question is about making our budget documents bigger, then I can certainly take that back and have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Morris.
Thank you. I guess to get into some more specific questions, I would encourage the Minister, I prefer making information public as much as possible. It helps the public do their own scrutiny. Even if they don't read it, the information's out there, and I think the substantiations are important for helping to understand why members may make the decisions the way they make, why members may not oppose projects, but it's a little bit hard to say when all you have is the name of the project and nothing more to go on. So I'd always encourage transparency where possible, and when there isn't really a good reason not to be transparent. And I can just say for the substantiations that I've been able to see for all of these projects, there's nothing in there that needs to be confidential. It's all, this is why the government's spending this money, and I dare even say the substantiations are quite good. So to get into a specific question, on the N.W.T courts modernization part, I note, well actually, sorry, Mr. Chair. This is exactly what this is the problem I'm talking about. I was about to start asking questions about the substantiation. And I'm now just realizing, of course, that substantiation is confidential. So I got to find a way to ask the question what the substantiation is. So can I get a description of the substantiation of the N.W.T courts modernization, please, before I ask questions about it? Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And doesn't happen. Mr. Chair, doesn't help when I'm looking at a blank page. Can I turn that to the Deputy Minister, please?
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Minister McKay.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the substantiation for this project is to replace the aging EOL courts management system. So that's called FACTS, and that manages day-to-day operations, but it's fairly old and needs to be replaced, so we need to modernize it with an electronic system that will allow for e-filing and digitizing of court-related paperwork. So it'll basically modernize and make the system more user-friendly. Thank you.
Minister McKay, we'll go back to the member from Frame Lake.
Mr. Chair, and yeah, if I could get a bit more elaboration, the part that I was kind of interested in is alignment with government priorities. So is there substantiation speaking to that specific item? Thanks.
Thank you. Member from Frame Lake, Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there is, and I appreciate the question. It doesn't necessarily line up from the title of the project, what it is, but by having a modernization project of this nature, we're actually making it easier for residents to access government services. It provides the ability to make services more accessible to all residents across the entire territory. It helps us decentralize those services, gives opportunity to greater decentralize the services, but also greater decentralize potentially positions associated with those services. These are obviously economic drivers. They are also obviously public safety drivers. And certainly to the extent that the justice system needs to conduct itself quickly and efficiently and in a manner that is in best keeping with best practices, that is definitely a core function of ensuring the justice system, which is functioning at its best, which is certainly a safety element. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak. Member from Frame Lake.
That's it for this round. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member from Frame Lake. Any further questions? The member from Great Slave.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I'm just scrolling furiously and possibly not getting somewhere where I want to get to fast enough. However, could I get a substantiation for the Technology Service Center infrastructure evergreening, please? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member from Great Slave. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this is simply an amount that allows us to ensure that the existing infrastructure that we have, technological infrastructure we have, remains current. There are a number of assets that come due for support, and that are, whether that's your servers, the networks, storage, telecommunications, all of which I think, I don't want to presuppose or assume, but technology changes very quickly. It changes quickly on a government scale as well. And so this provides us the ability to maintain some currency within that space by using this project budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Back to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, I'm having a little bit of a frog in my throat. It says here, replacement of capital server, network, and storage infrastructure. In that substantiation, Does the decision-making process that Cabinet commits to for many of its decision-making instruments apply? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member, Great Slave. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I mean, obviously every element of the budget does at some point come through the Department of, well, sorry, not the Department of the FMP, but through the FMB. But this is an item that is a standing, I guess, a standing element to sort of its own pot. It doesn't necessarily, quite frankly, I mean, what we're dealing with is, just to put some numbers to it, 7,000 different devices for all staff, which, 6,000 plus public servants, offices across 33 communities, some of which are on fiber, some of which are still on microwave. So an allocation of 1.95 million is meant to support all of that. It's a standing item. The individual decisions aren't like which computer or which office gets a new system don't necessarily come to us, but ensuring that there's a pot there available for the folks to do those operational decisions, that part is. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak. The member of Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I know that in the last Assembly there was a great deal of interest from the members around how we make decisions and specifically how Cabinet makes decisions on various pieces of information before them, be it decision instruments, be it financial decisions. And so part of that conversation was climate change considerations. So I'm just asking, I guess, do climate change considerations occur in the substantiations of these projects? Thank you.
Thank you to the member of Great Slave. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So climate change considerations are part of the substantiation sheets. Yeah, I mean, in this case, with respect to the $1.9 million allotted, or roughly thereabouts, allotted to maintain our basic infrastructure, this was not a consideration or factor that went strongly, really one way or the other. There was not a lot considered in this particular element. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak. The member of Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So something I've been thinking about and noticing a lot lately is the conversation around computer servers and specifically AI search engine servers, that sort of the thing and the like, contributing greatly to greenhouse gas emissions and water usage. So I recognize that these servers might not even exist necessarily in the territory. If they do, fine. If they are small scale, also fine. But I would hazard to guess that because of the way that the climate change considerations work, if these servers are indeed out of the territory, we can say then no, they don't impact climate change in the territory, but everything's interconnected. If the minister has any comments on that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you to the member of Great Slave. Minister Wozniak, do you have any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I actually have to say I was wondering if the question would be more around the waste that's created by electronic devices. So again, I can say, look, I appreciate that bringing attention to this particular item. Maybe when we go back, we look a little more carefully if there's some element that we still want to consider when we are putting forward the substantiation. Again, the essential nature of having this basic equipment to run the government, I don't think is lost, but just making sure we are turning our minds to the impacts. We aren't right now using the kinds of AI servers that are typical of having extremely high energy needs and very high emissions, but as the member said, there's a lot of interconnectedness. We rely on companies that have huge footprints. So again, keeping those considerations in mind is appreciated, and we'll make sure Nick knows that. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak. Next on the list, we have the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have, well, first a question about the courts modernization project. It looks like the budget for that project has more than doubled since it was first proposed. Like, this is a 3-year project. And, well, I guess the first question is, the current estimate of the budget over the 3 years, do we have any assurance that that's going to be the final cost, or do we expect that costs might still sort of increase further beyond what the estimated budget is now? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member from Yellowknife North. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This project has seen an increase to its original budget, and it's likely to see some further increase. And Mr. Chair, I don't get to do opening comments in terms of the topical areas we hit, but I will say, with respect to the IT infrastructure, over the last few years, there's been numerous occasions where we've seen an early stage budget that winds up being significantly off. And that is something that the department, with the Chief Information Officer, is trying to get a better handle on. Understanding the nature and the needs of the project more at the front end allows us to understand what the actual infrastructure, technological infrastructure requirements are better, so that we can have a more accurate budget, which has been a way of doing these kinds of projects precisely like this one, that we are going to see a few budgets get adjusted as a result of that, but hopefully as that process unfolds and becomes more ingrained, we will see more accurate budgets earlier on. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak. To the member, Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if this is the type of project that would have been improved by the project that's listed second, the Information Management and Technology Planning Studies Initiative. It seems like that initiative is trying to prevent situations like this from taking place, but maybe the minister can comment on whether this is a good example of what might be prevented by that planning studies project. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member, Yellowknife North. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is precisely what I was speaking to, but if I may, I might suggest having Chief Information Officer just speak to that a little bit further. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Wozniak.
Waiting for the light. Just go. Okay, go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to address with the $1 million in pre-planning or the planning studies. Oftentimes, in the past, when a project was approved, we only had a high-level idea of what the project is. We didn't have detailed requirements, and so this is all intended to give you a better upfront estimate, similar to how you would do it in a building of a building or a road. You do sort of pre-planning, geotechnical design, that sort of thing. This is very similar, but in the IT world, that allows us to get to a greater degree of certainty on what the project scope is going to be, what the budget is going to be, and then hopefully avoid these situations where we end up with a 2-year project that turns into a 5-year project that doubles its budget and it takes forever to complete. So.
Thank you, Mr. Heffernan. To you there, member from the Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that's good news. I'm also wondering if in a project like this, where it's multi-year and then year by year, either we realize we need to increase the scope, like the replacement of driver's licensing system. My understanding was that it initially was supposed to be improvements, and then later on decided, well, we better replace the whole system. So if a project is sort of year after year, either the cost turned out to be way greater or the scope is increasing, to what extent do we have off-ramps for a project like this, where there might be an option to just stop and not do any more? Or is it sort of decided that as soon as a project is started, that we have to follow it to its conclusion and just keep spending sort of any amount of money to just finish the thing? Or what kinds of consideration goes into at what point do we find an off-ramp and just say it's good enough? Or I mean, using this specific project as an example, but maybe there's others too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the member Yellowknife North. Minister Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One consideration with, well, I guess two considerations with off-ramps initially. The first one that I was going to suggest is that we not put ourselves into a situation where the cost of coming off on the off-ramp actually winds up being just kicking a cost down the line and being greater later. Again, not dissimilar to actual physical infrastructure that you can delay a renovation, you can delay a fix, but you may wind up with a bigger problem down the line. We do, obviously, and certainly trying to put it back into this context, if it's clear that the value can't be delivered within the scope of the project that it is, you certainly, and we have seen projects in the IT space in the last few years that have had to come to a stop and not advance because the initial estimate is just too low and it can't move forward. In other cases, you can take it and limit the scope and do just part of what you want to do. You can try to create a system that will allow you to build onto it later. And then you can also then try to ensure that the technology that you're using or the software that you're using is at least modern, can at least be, again, triaging what the situation is. So there's definitely these opportunities to either stop a project, delay a project, or rescope it depending on just how big the problem is or how much risk there is involved. That's probably about the best I can do without a more specific example, but again, appreciate the question.
Mr. Wozniak, the member from Yellowknife North.
That's fine, Mr. Chair. That's all my questions on this. Thanks.
Thank you to the member from Yellowknife North. Any further questions from committee? Seeing none. The Department of Finance, Office of the Chief Information Officer, Infrastructure Investments, $5,068,000. Does committee agree? Agreed. Thank you, members. Please return to the Department of Finance summary found on page 33. The Department of Finance 2025-2026 capital estimates, $5,068,000. Does committee agree? The member for Boot Lake, Inuvik Boot Lake.
Sorry. This is, we're done with complete finance, sorry?
Yep.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I apologize. I move that the committee defer further consideration of the capital estimates for the Department of Finance at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you to the Inuvik Boot Lake member. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion is carried. Consideration of the Department of Finance 2025-2026 capital estimates, total to the department is deferred. Thank you, committee, and thank you to the Minister, Sergeant at Arms. Please escort the witnesses from the chamber. Committee, you have agreed to consider table documents 193-20 brackets 1 capital estimates 2025-2026 Department of Justice. Does the Minister of Justice wish to bring in witnesses to the chamber?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do. Thank you.
Does committee agree? Thank you. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses into the chamber. Would the Minister please introduce the witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With me on my left is Charlene Doolittle, the Deputy Minister of the Department of Justice, and on my right is James Bancroft, the Director of Corporate Services with the Department of Justice. Thank you.
Thank you. The committee has agreed to forego general comments. Is the committee agreed to proceed to the details contained in the table document? Committee, the Department of Justice begins on page 62. We will defer the department totals and review the estimates by activity summary beginning on page 63. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none. The Department of Justice, Corrections, Infrastructure Investments, $880,000. Does committee agree? Next, we have Court Services on page 65 with the information item on 66. Are there any questions? We have the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I note that the project here listed is a washroom accessibility upgrade for the Yellowknife Courthouse. Could the Minister please provide a substantiation for this project? Thank you.
Thanks to the member from Great Slave. Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Yellowknife Courthouse was built in 1977 and 1978, and the existing washrooms on floors 2 to 6 are original to the building. These washrooms have a 90-degree enclosed vestibule entry with doors on each side of the vestibule. Obviously, this is not an accessible washroom, and upgrades are required to ensure that all residents are able to use these facilities. Thank you.
Thank you to the Minister of Justice, the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for that. And it's always good to hear that we are increasing accessibility to our public-facing offices. I'm curious, and I apologize if it's not the right minister that I should be asking, but as it is his project, I will ask him. The way that we weight capital projects and how we choose certain buildings for upgrades. I understand it's a bit of a sliding scale of this is falling apart or this is very, very important. Could the Minister speak as to why this upgrade is occurring over maybe other buildings in the N.W.T? Thank you.
Thank you to the member Great Slave, Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'll speak a bit to my experience in my previous role, where I was generally given a slate of options for capital projects, and some of those include accessibility options. And so as Minister, I would move forward with those. I personally prioritize those. In this instance here, these these renovations are resulting from a Human Rights Adjudication Panel decision about the accessibilities of the washrooms. And that's why we have the Human Rights Adjudication Panel, so that when there are issues like this identified, they can be rectified. And so I'm thankful that this is one that we are rectifying. Thank you.
Thank you to the Minister of Justice, the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for that clarification. I greatly appreciate it. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you to the member Great Slave. Any further questions from committee? Seeing none, the Department of Justice, Court Services, Infrastructure Investment, $600,000 as committee agree. Thank you. Members, please return now to the Department of Justice summary found on page 62. Department of Justice, 2025-2026 capital estimates, $1,480,000. Does committee agree? Thank you. Member for Inuvik-Bootleg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that this committee defer further consideration of the capital estimates for the Department of Justice at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The motion is in order. To the motion. Question has been called. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The motion is carried. Consideration of the Department of Justice 2025-2026 capital estimates, total departmental deferred. Thank you, committee, and thank you to the Minister. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the witnesses from the chamber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move that the Chair rise and report progress.
Thank you. There's a motion on the floor there to report progress. The motion is in order and non-debatable. Massey. All those opposed? The motion is carried, and I will now report progress. Massey.
Thank you. Member from the Sot-2.
Mrs. Oh, a little bit rusty. Mr. Speaker, your committee has been considering table documents 193-20 brackets 1 and would like to report progress with 2 motions carried. And, Mr. Speaker, I move that the report of the Committee of the Whole be concurred with. Massey.
Thank you. Member from the Sot-2. Can I have a seconder? Member from Hay River South. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? Motion passed. Reports on Committee of the Whole. Reports on Committee of the Whole. Third reading of bills. Third reading of bills. Madam Clerk, orders of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Orders of the day for Thursday, October 24th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m. Prayer, Minister Statement, Member Statement, returns to order questions. recognition of visitors in the gallery, acknowledgements, oral questions, written questions, returns to written questions, replies to the Commissioner's address, petitions, reports of committees on the review of bills, reports of standing and special committees, tabling of documents, notice of motion, motion, notice of motion of first reading of bills, second reading of bills, consideration in committee of the whole of bills and other matters, table document 193-20, bracket 1, report of committee of the whole, third reading of bills, orders of the day.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, for doing a great job. Colleagues, this House stands adjourned until Thursday, October 24th, 2024 at 1:30 p.m.
Order!